Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, where we answer your questions on political philosophy, on philosophy more generally, on history, on international affairs, on all those things that concern our attempt to enjoy the blessings of peace, order, and good government.
All right, here's a question. Well, I say two questions and one from Dave. And he says, I noticed a few months ago that you made mention of several of the nicknames or the titles attached to the names of some of our past rulers. The great, the unready, the martyr, the peaceful, the perhaps great but ended up the chump with an arrow in the eye, etc., etc. In that same vein, he's asking, how might you name our most recent prime ministers? And would even one of them remotely qualify as tar palantir? I think I'm pronouncing this right. Now, while you're thinking about this, I'll ask his second question because I think you'll like that one. He says, while I have you, just as a point of curiosity, what are your thoughts concerning the architecture of modern parking garages? He's just wondering.
Well, I've been fishing for that question, and I greatly appreciate it. But first of all, if I am remembering my High Elven properly, tar palantir means the far-seeing. And we haven't had a leader who possessed that quality in any real way, I think, since Winston Churchill. A man who gave so many prophetic warnings, both in the 1930s and indeed after the war, all of which were scorned or ignored. Churchill said that trying to warn people in the 1930s about the rise of Nazism was, the debate was like being smothered by a feather mattress, which is a wonderful metaphor. There have been people who at least aspired to have vision. And I would even put Trudeau Sr. in that category. The problem is he didn't have real vision. It's not even like, there is a bon mot, which I believe was Richard Nixon on Charles de Gaulle. I've been unable to find a source for it. But he once said of de Gaulle that he had a vision that spanned centuries. The problem is he was looking the wrong way. If Nixon didn't say it, he missed a great opportunity. But you look at someone like Stephen Harper, who supposedly was this sort of strategist and he was going to build a lasting conservative majority. But it was all tactics and it was all nasty. That's the other thing. If we're going to give him a nickname, I think it has to be the Surly. And you know, Justin Trudeau, well, maybe he's going to surprise us, but he's certainly, yeah, that's good. I was going to say the doofus, but I think the selfie's even better. Joe Clark, I mean, he was Joe Who, you know, Joe the Hapless. And you look at the United States, you know, Barack Obama, what's it going to be? The Annoying. You know, Barack Obama is fundamentally annoying. Bill Clinton, the Slick Rogue. George Bush, thanks for coming out. They're really, these names, and it's funny too, and I always emphasize this, that some of these names come out of the Dark Ages, which get pretty bad press these days because we're obviously so much better than our ancestors. Athelstan the Magnificent, grandson of Alfred the Great, and he really was a magnificent ruler. He was wise, he summoned councils, he listened to their advice, he included people, he was a pious man, he founded churches, he promoted learning. Edgar the Peaceful, who was actually his nephew.
I'm going to stop you there because I want to answer Dave's question before you answer his other question. How about Brian Mulroney?
Brian Mulroney, the
opportunity misser?
Could have been, yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Because if he hadn't had this compulsion to be liked, especially by liberals, he might really have made changes in this country. He did put us on the path of free trade, and that was a good thing. And the GST was actually good, although it certainly was handled weirdly. But you notice that Chrétien, the competent, let's call him Chrétien the competent. But also maybe Chrétien the cold, because there was, unfortunately, a chilly side to him. He kept these things. But no, it is just Ronald Reagan. Well, he's the Gipper, and that's not a bad nickname. But was he really great? Did he really change the trajectory of America? I don't think you can say that he did. And you know, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady. Now, there's a good.
How about Kim
title.
Campbell, the 20-minute prime minister?
Yeah, look, it's a girl. Oops, she's gone. You know, that's not the sort of nickname that you really want.
Paul Martin.
You know, she's no Elizabeth I. Paul Martin, Mr. Dithers. You know, the man who would have been king. And it's what that line about the Roman Emperor Galba, I think it is, that everybody would be agreed that he was fitted to rule if only he had not ruled.
Okay, may I answer something here? Because I think everybody calls Justin Trudeau the kid. Well, a lot of people do. And I would think that if you were to go for a nickname for his father, that's the one I would call the kid.
Well, yes, that is a good point, because one of the things about Pierre Trudeau, I'm glad you reminded me, because I'd gotten off onto Dark Ages kings.
As you're wont to do.
That Pierre Trudeau had a reputation for being incredibly smart and for being an intellectual, but he wasn't. He was a shallow and frivolous man. He toyed with ideas, but he didn't take them seriously. he was self-indulgent and undisciplined, and that's why I find that there was a great deal of similarity in the good qualities, including the courage, but also in the bad qualities, including the shallowness between father and son. I mean, Justin Trudeau will be judged not on his paternity, but on his performance. But apples often fall close to the tree, and this one did in some surprising ways. So yeah, Trudeau was the hollow man, the shallow. I'm talking about Trudeau Sr. Yeah, we call him Pierre the Shallow. Look at the mess he made of our Constitution. Incredible how poorly he'd thought through these things.
All right. All right. How about parking garages? Yes.
Parking garages are hideous. There's modernity. They're soul destroying. I am never closer to despair than in a parking garage. And you notice this when people go on vacations and they go to see things. What do they want to see? It doesn't matter where in the world they go. They want to see the old buildings, the beautiful buildings. And there's a point here from G.K. Chesterton that when we talk about the architecture of Egypt, we say the Egyptians built these things. This feeling that the style came out of an entire people and a way of living. But you look at modern, and he was talking about suburban housing back in the 1920s, it doesn't seem to come from anywhere. Nobody really likes it. These aren't houses built for the people who are going to occupy them. They're called, there's William Morris called them man hutches, but Chesterton calls them man traps. They're houses that are meant to make you think that this will be a nice place to live, and once you move in, you realize nobody really likes suburbia. Most of the mockery of suburbia comes from suburbia. But the parking garage is the apotheosis of this. There's a good word. It is modernity in its stark, brutal, concrete hideousness. There's nothing natural. There isn't a sign of the hand of God. And the only thing you want to do is get out of it as quickly as possible and then get back in without getting mugged, get your car, and get the heck out of there to somewhere nice.
But you can make them nice. I remember in the late 90s, I was at UCLA for a while, and I noticed a building, and I took pictures of it before I realized, because I thought it was pretty, before I realized it was not an underground, but overground parking garage. It was about 6 or 7 stories high. And it was actually quite pretty, because you have to make allowances for the fact that people do have cars, and you need to put them somewhere some of the time, and not just on the sidewalks like they do in England. You have to put them somewhere in a parking garage, or a car park, as they call it there. So you have sometimes to have those garages, but are there ways to make them less hideous?
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, you speak of London, and throughout England, we saw the most amazingly beautiful buildings, all of them old, and we saw these modern carbuncles, even this extension to the Museum of Natural History that ought to be in the Museum of Man-Made Disasters. Why not build, and not just your car parks, but your office buildings, like castles, or like Georgian mansions with those facades, with carvings, statements of things you believe in. I mean, the classic Museum of Natural History, which is Victorian, is like a temple to knowledge, very deliberately modeled on the architectural style of cathedrals. Modern architecture, in its hideousness, in its shallow meanness, really reflects the fact that we don't seem to believe in anything, including the buildings we're putting up temporarily. There is nothing here that is meant to last, and nothing here that should last. So why not build a parking castle?
It's like that triangular glass thing near the Louvre. That's so ugly. And compare that, like the Museum of Natural History in London is right next to the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is, you could just spend a week looking at the building. I'll put a picture up so people can see it. It's just magnificent.
Yeah, and we have the technique and the wealth, the materials to build anything. We are so much better off than our ancestors in what we could build, and we are so much worse off in what we do build. But I really think that nothing, not even suburban housing or those glass and steel office towers full of cubicles, nothing is worse than a parking lot.
All right. Special thanks to Dave for having, risen to the bait and asked you the question you so wanted to answer. Folks, if you want to ask your question of the professor, go to the URL on your screen, and everything there will be explained. Thanks, and see you next time.